everyone, and welcome back to the Organizing to Victory podcast, where we're talking garage politics. My name's Lee Perry, and in today's episode, we have Antione Fields, an incredible young man who's trying to get money out of politics and is running for Florida House of Representative District 21. This area includes Gainesville and Ocala, and he talks about his journey into politics, which started with the murder of Trayvon Martin and is escalating into his fight to gain back control of his local municipal utility in Gainesville. We talk about the climate crisis and we talk about criminal justice reform. It's a really good conversation. So here's my conversation with Antione. So in 2026, we have probably the most important elections of Florida's future, and the Florida legislature has been controlled by a Republican monopoly for well over 20 years. And this year in 2026, we have all these up-and-comers, all these incredible candidates that are standing up and saying, enough is enough, I'm going to run for office. And today in my house, right here next to me, we have somebody who's going to stand up and say, enough is enough. So Antione Fields is here, who's running for Florida House District 21. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I'm so excited to learn about you. I've seen your social media. I've stalked your website. You look really cool, really young, really progressive, but you also seem like you have some really strong ideas for policy.
Absolutely.
And I'm a policy nerd. I like to get into it. So first, let's talk a little bit about like where you were born and how you kind of grew into politics.
Yeah. So actually, I was born in Atlanta. It's where most of my family's from. But I moved when I was 2. My mom moved us down. She left an abusive relationship. And so we primarily lived with my grandparents in Jacksonville until my mom met my stepdad. He was from Ocala. And so then Ocala became home. So I grew up between Jacksonville and Ocala before going to UCF and living in Orlando for a bit.
Okay. So you go Knights.
Charge on.
We have to say that. It's mandatory. And how was your experience in college?
Incredible. I felt like I finally got to just be free and be myself. UCF is huge. So I just got super involved. I was an RA, an O-teamer. I got into student government. So I had the time of my life. I felt like I had the experience that you see in movies, and I have so many close friends that I still keep in contact with every day from UCF. So I'm so grateful for the experience I had there.
That's great. When I went to college, I was one of the few people that was vocal about climate change. And I really went through a lot of like depression because I was like really politically plugged in, or at least just starting to really get politically plugged in. And a lot of my friends weren't in tune with that. And you're younger than me, not by much though. And I'm curious, when you were in college, were a lot of people like activated and ready to like kind of get politically plugged in, or were you really involved?
I feel like a lot of folks were very like ready to get plugged in. I was kind of in the bubble being in student government, so I was surrounded by a lot of really active people. But I would definitely say climate change was one of the bigger things that people were pushing for. We did a lot of work when I was in college to try to be more sustainable. We work with the student union to literally build new recycling bins and to station them all across inside and outside the union. So we definitely saw a lot of folks organizing around climate issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think now when I go to UCF, I'm invited to speak sometimes, like young people are stepping up in so many more ways than when I was in college back in 2013. It is incredible to watch, like young people. I don't want to expose you for how old you are, but if you'd like to share, you don't look a day over 21. It's really, really inspiring to see young people getting involved.
Yeah, I think for one, I would also say that young people have always kind of been at the forefront of so many political movements over the course of this country's history. But I think especially now and over the last few years, we've really seen a rise of young people saying, we're not going to wait until we're a certain age. We're fighting for our future. And because a lot of folks my age, when I talk to them, they want to have kids, but they know it's expensive. They want to own a house, but it feels out of reach. And so we have to do something, and we can't just keep, waiting around for someone else to save us. So
what are some of the issues that you kind of saw growing up Like, you brought up the lack of affordability and affordable housing. Like, were some of your friends like paycheck to paycheck, or like what were some of the struggles that you saw?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up, we were still paycheck to paycheck. I was on free lunch in school, and that was a blessing. And I had, friends that probably should have been on free lunch, and I would see them come to school hungry. I would feel bad for the students that you would see like having to get called to the back, and they come back with just like a sandwich and crackers. So I feel like the affordability issue is prevalent everywhere. Even like folks not having cars to be able to get to and from school, and maybe not being on the bus route. And so they would have to catch rides with folks. One of my best friends didn't have a car, so my mom would pick us both up and drop us off. And it worked out that we worked together. We had a job at Wendy's. So, but yeah, I think a lot of folks struggle. And I think even growing up, I didn't know that like I was necessarily kind of poor in that sense. Like, I think looking back, I'm like, wow, like my mom sacrificed a lot. I don't think, someone should be working a full-time job and still barely able to make, ends meet. And I feel like, I had everything that I needed, but I saw the strain that put on my mom even getting ready to go to college. And I was the first person in my family to go to college. And so when I first started talking about it and like looking at the cost, I'll never forget my mom saying, don't worry about it. You're going to go to college. I'm just going to get a second job. And I just couldn't even imagine how she would be able to take on another job on top of everything else that she was doing, and taking care of me. Luckily, I ended up getting Bright Futures and Pell Grants and stuff, so she didn't have to do that. But I think especially right now with everything rising except for wages, that so many people here are working full-time jobs and it's not enough. And that's just for like a single person. If you have kids, the expenses just keep going up. So.
Right. Well, why run for office?
So many reasons.
I mean, you were already politically active in college, so you kind of knew what a campaign was, and you already knew how to like create a good brand and sell a message. But why didn't you just go into the private sector?
Because I'm a person that likes to affect change. If I see a problem, I like to try to solve it. And so there's so many levers that can be pulled at the state level specifically, that affect the way the state is run all of our lives. And, like you said, I worked in the process. I've worked on campaigns. I've helped get bills passed. And so when I looked at this race, I was like, okay, we need more bold progressives, I feel like, in office that understand how the process works and that'll be able to deliver and also can just, put up a fight. And so I said, you know what, I have the tools, I have the time, I can make the time. So I'm just going to get out there and do it. And it's also, I think one of the last big pushes for me was Zorahan's election in New York. And I think there was a report that came out from Run for Something that was like, thousands of young people started signing up to want to run for office. And I think for me, it showed, his popularity nationally. It showed that there is a real appetite for something new, for politics that actually centers people and puts them first. And so I felt energized again. I think working, especially organizing in Florida at the last few election cycles, it started to feel pretty bleak. But I got this renewed sense of hope again. And so that's why I just decided now's the time.
Was there a specific light bulb moment on like an issue that you were angry about? Like most candidates say, like something pissed them off so bad that it pushed them over the line. Or was it just the inspiration from the Mamdani win that you had that glowy feeling that made you brave enough to jump in?
I'm passionate about a lot of issues. So for me, it just felt like, one thing after another, working in the legislature and seeing them, crack down on like protesting, seeing them go after like our immigrant community, going after trans kids, seeing them trying to, restrict the right to vote and to gerrymander these districts. And, they limited debate so that, Democrats can't really put up a fight as much. And it just felt like, this is never going to stop. We're going down a really, really dark path. And we need folks that recognize the urgency of this moment, and are willing to, be bold and to dream big of how to get us out of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, you're going up to a really tough political climate. These are not friendly people. most of my Republican friends that have been lobbying for years say that it's intolerable up there. They don't recognize their own party. People say sometimes, oh, well, Democrats, good luck to them, but they can't do anything. What are you excited about in your ability to not just try really hard to pass legislation, but, there's also other opportunities to really be a messenger on the issues? What are some things that are like your top priority that you're ready to work on?
Yeah. So biggest thing for me is pushing the fight for universal healthcare at the state level. I feel like most folks just talk about Medicare for all at the federal level. But in the meantime, I think we need to be talking about it at the state level. Our economy is big enough. We already pay for it really with costs that get passed on to those of us with insurance. And so I believe that healthcare is a human right. I don't think, no one should be denied access to care because they don't have money. For me, that just feels immoral. It's wrong. And so that is a really big thing for me. And as I've been door knocking and talking with folks, they're really excited to hear people talking about it because everyone either has or knows someone that has a horror story dealing with healthcare.
Yeah. I mean, Florida in particular, we just had JJ Holmes on, who's a disabilities advocate. For years, there's been millions, if not, they said $1 billion on the news this week, has just been kind of tucked away and not being dispersed to families that have children with like extreme disabilities that they need in-home care. That's just one micro example of all the ways that Florida has been neglecting people's health. I remember when the American Rescue Plan was being administered and then the Inflation Reduction Act was being administered, like DeSantis was at the forefront saying that he's going to turn away those funds just to spite Joe Biden. When we always are told that we don't have enough resources to implement initiatives like expanding our healthcare.
Yeah, but we have plenty of money for a lot of other things. And I think we have a priorities problem. Our politics aren't focused on people, and it's so unfortunate to see. I think it's malicious to just turn away money out of spite that could literally save lives.
Well, I mean, Florida is for some reason a place where people are constantly electing folks that I feel have a rhetoric of punishing migrants or punishing, students that speak out, protesters, teachers that have LGBTQ, items in their classrooms, but they keep getting elected without delivering. And I know it's so frustrating because as a Democrat, it's like you have to jump through all these hoops to be like, look, I'm willing to do this, and that. And even when they do deliver, people still are questioning, could they have done more? And with Republicans, it's like they're just constantly targeting minorities in order to distract from the lack of getting bills actually passed that help everyday people. Yeah,
I think the last 2 years, we've seen a significant decrease in the number of bills that have actually been passed out of the legislature. And given some of the bills that they do like to pass, that might be a good thing. But we've also gone back-to-back years without even a state budget getting passed on time.
That's like the number one thing they're supposed to do.
The one thing that they are constitutionally required to do is to pass a budget each year. And you would think in an affordability crisis, a healthcare crisis, a climate crisis, that would be their number one priority. And it's like, we didn't get a state budget, but we got a bill to rename an airport after a twice impeached president. So,
we also are the front lines for things like extreme acts of gun violence. We're the front lines for the immigration raids that are happening here. We don't get shown as much on TV or on social media, the raids that are happening, because we have basically militarized and federalized every single agency controlled by the state in order to go after migrant families. And, we're also ground zero for climate change and hurricanes and extreme weather events and coral die-offs and, pollution that's affecting our biodiversity. And yet every year we get these crazy bills that are going after like chemtrails or banning net zero goals instead of getting people relief.
Yeah. I think one, it's, intentional to distract. They do a lot of things to distract from the problems that they're not willing to address or trying to fix. But also, I think it's so unfortunate to see, on issues such as climate, where the state has made it clear that they don't really want to take the kind of action that they need to. Time and time again, when cities and local governments try to take the necessary steps, the state swoops in and passes a bill to preempt them and says, nope, can't do that. We're taking it over.
But sometimes it's even contradictory to what their party has overwhelmingly proved that they want. Like when you talk about gun violence, after the Parkland shooting, the state legislature said that they would raise the minimum age for purchasing a firearm. And this year they had the audacity to try and pass lowering it again to 18 years old.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane to do in a state like Florida that has witnessed two of the worst mass shootings in this country. And I think part of it is to a degree is that, the lobbyists and the corporate special interests that write the checks and stuff push for a lot of these policies. It's no secret how much money the NRA, for example, puts behind candidates and trying to push these sorts of things. And I think we just continue to see where those interests get put over the interests of us and even our safety.
It's really a shame because, it's something that I know it's a nonpartisan issue. It's affecting all of our kids. Gun violence is the leading cause of, childhood deaths in the United States of America. It's hard for that to even come out of my mouth. And we continue to see this push that I believe, like you said, is really just the lobbyists from these gun manufacturers handing the language over and saying like, hey, go ahead and turn this in.
Yeah, I think that is exactly why, because like you said, it's completely contradictory to the things that they say. Even some of the, solutions to deal with it, they want to arm teachers. And it's like, how do we just keep adding more guns to the situation and expecting a different outcome?
I grew up around teachers that were very abusive. Like I've had to break up a fight of a teacher putting his hands on a child. I was 9. And so I don't think that's the answer.
Yeah, me neither. I think, and especially I think we'd see that really impact students of color specifically.
100%. I know that, I actually grew up in Sanford. That's where my first apartment was. And that was actually the same street where Trayvon Martin was shot and killed.
Oh, wow.
And I remember like how momentous that was for our community. And now, I mean, the state legislature is not really reflecting that.
Yeah. I mean, if I wouldn't be here today, I don't think, if Trayvon Martin was still alive. That is the thing that completely radicalized me and changed the way that I saw the world. I mean, might be tap over, but I had never even seen a dead body in my life before until, every day coming home from school. And I was, I think, freshman, at most a sophomore in high school. I would sit in front of the TV and watch the news to keep up with the court case. And just hearing how everything happened, but even more specifically watching the news and hearing how some of the folks were pushing such, racist stereotypes and trying to paint him out as a villain or as a thug. And for me, it's like I saw myself in Trayvon. He was right down the road, a few years older than me. And I just started thinking, like, if something happened to me, like, is this how, people would try to portray me and try to, find reasons as to why I should just be murdered in cold blood? And so when that not guilty verdict came down for George Zimmerman, it completely broke me. I bawled my eyes out. I didn't, like, in my head, I didn't even think that was possible, that it would turn out that way. But I knew it was wrong, and I knew that we needed to do something. And that's when originally I decided, like, I wanted to become a lawyer. So when I went to college, I was majoring political science, pre-law. determined to go to law school, because I told myself if I could put myself in a position where I can fight for folks like him or try to do something to make sure where that could never happen again, then that would be my calling. And so everywhere I go, when people ask me what got me into politics, I bring him up, because I think for a lot of folks my age across the country, that was such a huge, pivotal, defining moment. That was my introduction to Black Lives Matter. I didn't need to see or hear, Michael Brown and Breonna Taylor and all the names that continued to come after that. That should have been enough.
Oh my God, 100%. I mean, I don't give up on Florida. That's the whole reason why I even have a podcast. Per this moment in time, we haven't, we're recording this a few weeks earlier than what we're posting it. But, LaVon Bracey Davis, Senator LaVon Bracey Davis, actually has a bill that's moved through, I believe, the House and the Senate for reparations for the families that survived the Ocoee massacre. And for her to get bipartisan support on legislation like that can show you that I think we have a glimmer of hope in order to work across the aisle and get some things done. But one of the particular things that I like about you being young, I would like to assume that you have a very basic understanding of like how to communicate to people through social media. That is something I'm most excited about young people running for office, is because dictatorship thrives in people being controlled in how they understand and learn information, as we can see with like monopolies, like kind of coming together and taking over mainstream media. Here in Florida, we have a real opportunity because young people are able to proactively communicate a message a little bit more diligently and not just kind of disappear until the next election cycle, like some, Democrats and Republicans tend to do. And with that, you're able to really show people what you can get done and what you're fighting for, even if you can't get it passed.
Yeah, I think that's been a really great thing about the election of Mondani in New York, is that his social media game is so good and he has so many eyes on him that people across the country are seeing, wait, government can actually do things for us. Like you can run on something, say you're going to do it, and actually turn around and do it. And it doesn't have to take 8 years or whatever. You can start getting stuff done right away. And that's the way that government should work. It should be responsive to the people's needs. You shouldn't hopefully have to fight, 10 years just for the basic necessities and the promise of the American dream, And so I've also seen so many young folks my age really start to use their platforms to talk about the issues, posting reels and TikToks, and starting those kinds of conversations. So many friends also starting podcasts to just talk about what's going on in the world. And I think we started to see a shift where especially young people aren't turning towards news sites. They're turning towards podcasts, influencers, and just, short clips and videos as opposed to the news, because folks know that pretty much every major broadcast news network is owned by some billionaire that owns a lot of other networks, and they censor and kind of control the things that we see. And I think they also fan a lot of the hate and division that we see, because it pushes their agenda, because we're too busy looking left and right at each other that we're not looking up at the billionaires that are pulling strings. So I think it has been really great to see so many folks using their platform to speak out.
So tell me about your race and who you're running against and how your platform compares.
Yeah, so I am now in a very crowded primary. It is an open blue seat. It's only Democrats running. I'm one of 5 candidates. I would say I am by far the most progressive. I'd say the only progressive in this race. And I am the only candidate that has taken the pledge not to take a dime of money from corporate PACs or lobbyists. And I feel like especially now that really, really matters. And it resonates with a lot of people because I think folks are naturally distrusting of politics in general. And I also think within our party, a lot of folks have started to lose faith in us as being the party of working class people, because they recognize that left or right, there's a lot of money getting thrown in behind a lot of folks in office. Some of the same corporations and lobbyists that, might give money to right-wing extremists will also donate to Democrats too, because they don't care about party, they care about profit. And so when I tell people, I recognize that the policies and stuff that we have in place aren't really benefiting us, the working class. And when they say, well, how are you going to be different? I say, well, anything that comes from me is because I actually believe it. I can't be bought. This seat for me is for the people. And so that's been my focus, and that's been my central message. You can connect any issue. Here in Florida, there is some group that probably spends millions and millions of dollars to try to steer the policy in a certain way.
Well, number one player in Florida politics, well, I'm not sure if they're number one, but I think they're in the top three at least, is, Florida Power and Light and these utility companies that think they own the state legislature, and they've personally filed and pushed bills through different legislators that, shield them from any type of accountability, whether it's from their pollution or from their rate hikes. They've, mingled with the Republican-controlled legislature and governor in order to get their, dream picks appointed to the Public Service Commission. And, this has had huge ramifications for your district.
Yeah, we are dealing with the state coming in and completely just dismantling the utilities board in Gainesville, GRU, and the voters in Gainesville they voted twice overwhelmingly. I think 73 and 75% in favor of restoring control of the GRU to the folks that live there. And I think for one, like you mentioned, Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, they pretty much run all the utilities across the state.
Don't forget Tico.
Them too. But the GRU is one of the few municipally owned utilities. And so they don't serve, shareholders, they serve the people. And the voters elect the city commissioners who represent them to help run that board. So they have a direct voice in that process. And Gainesville has also been a leader in terms of, sustainability issues and trying to reduce pollution, the carbon footprint, and get towards, I think 2040 renewable energy goals. And they also prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion, which the state has been going after as well. And so all those kind of things that are important to the people of Gainesville are getting thrown out the window by a governor appointed board. So
Republicans don't like diversity, they don't like equity, and they don't like inclusion.
That's what's been going around.
Interesting. They say DEI because they don't want to break down that they're saying they don't like diversity, they don't like equity. And they don't like inclusion.
Yeah.
I don't know what is more racist of a statement than that.
Yeah, it's insane that is something that they basically run on now.
Well, I know that they are attacking your local municipal utility, and that is having huge ramifications in other areas, like here in the city of Orlando, where our local utility is basically being threatened behind the scenes to do a lot of things like, reversing some of their climate goals. And a lot of this never makes it to the public. This is another reason why I'm excited about young people running is you have the ability to really break these things down in a Mamdani style way, where a lot of elected officials stay silent on these issues if they're too complicated or complex to explain to the public. And yet behind the scenes, that's where these, for-profit utilities can really thrive, because they can make threats. They can basically say to a utility like OUC, hey, if you don't want to happen to you what just happened to Gainesville's utility, then you better stay in line.
Yeah, I definitely think they were trying to make an example out of Gainesville, and they've gone after them before. And for me, it's just ridiculous, because I feel like if the state doesn't want to, actually act on climate, and they see cities and local governments willing to step out of the way. Don't come in and just take over against the will of the people. We're talking about voters going not once, but twice to the ballot box to make their voice heard, and then to have the state basically come in and say, we don't care, we're going to do it our way. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of special interests, but then the state legislature chooses which ones they want to listen to the loudest, right? Yep. And that usually comes down to how much you're willing to spend in their campaign contributions.
Yep.
But, you know, for this as an example, Florida is number 2 in the number of electric vehicles that have been purchased. And Republicans are actually the majority of consumers that have been purchasing these electric vehicles. And yet, for example, the state legislature has preempted the ability for local governments to create their own public charging stations to incentivize more of these, you know, green technologies that people can utilize. And that's because the utilities want to, you know, develop, manage, own, and eventually charge a fee for people to use their energy. They want to tax people permanently to have electric vehicles.
It's actually insane. And again, it goes back to they literally vote against their own interests. And that shows you just how powerful money is here in politics.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, with property insurance, you know, we are the epicenter of the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. We know hurricanes are not going away. Thank God we've had a year or two of where, you know, hurricanes have lessened, but there's been worse, higher wind ratio of hurricanes that have come through Florida. And I don't think we really have a plan. You know, not only has various property insurance companies actually, you know, sign people on to, you know, new, I'm losing my words here, but they have signed people on for new rates and then completely left the state and left people high and dry.
Yeah.
And then Citizens comes in and says, hey, we have this public option. And so many people have been denied or dropped, you know, and left with nothing, uninsurable homes. You know, and we don't really have a plan. And I don't know why these representatives keep getting reelected when people should be furious that they're stuck without, you know, having coverage.
Yeah, I think, you know, we are going back for a special session just this week.
Yeah.
But for more gerrymandering, we still have the property insurance crisis to deal with. And even that was scheduled, you know, for later after. So it shows you how kind of low down on the priorities it is for them. And I think, you know, people are upset. They are frustrated because it's not hard, you know, to see when you go to like the gas, when you're getting your bills, anything, anywhere, that everything is so expensive right now. And I think what has kind of started to happen over the last few years is that Republicans have pretty much scapegoated everyone from immigrants to Muslims to like reproductive rights, you name it. As like, okay, be mad about this, you know, this is why everything is not working for you right now. When in reality, we all know that that is not the case. And so I think it's important that we continue to call them out on their failures in terms of governing and enacting, you know, real policies that are going to actually make a difference. They just fight over culture wars that they create in their heads.
And it feels like there's a level of like con artistry that's happening here with some of these property insurance companies, because they're coming in, picking up these policies and then just fleeing the state or dropping people at any notice. I've heard like Senator Carlos Guillermo-Smith like throw out ideas of, in order to operate here in the state of Florida, you have to carry a certain number of policies. I mean, do you have any ideas as to like how you could hold these companies accountable?
Oh, I mean, I do think that would be a start. I think maybe figuring out a system to where like you're locked in to come into Florida for X amount of time, even because we can't just have folks coming and picking up all those folks, getting the money and then leaving. So, you know, there has to be some sort of mechanism that holds them accountable to actually serving our residents and not leaving them high and dry.
Mm-hmm. Or even just bolstering the public option. I mean, we put $430 million into Alligator Alcatraz from our FEMA money.
Ridiculous. And
now we're not getting reimbursed.
Yeah. And they're trying to build another one out in Bradford County. So
it's like, that's the money that could be in case of an emergency to help rebuild and to help make sure that families are not left stranded. And I'm just terrified that they're not prioritizing this. And we're going to have, we had Hurricane Dorian. It was a category 5, almost 6 that, went and destroyed Jamaica. And had it just been a few more miles inland, it could have gone down the spine of Florida and destroyed, our main roads, our so many homes. I mean, it could have been devastating. And every hurricane since then has been devastating to pocket communities. But we are not that far off from having a monster, almost category 7 hurricane that could potentially destroy Florida. And I really don't think we have a plan.
I don't think we do. We do either. And we know that with climate change, these things continue to worsen. But there's no urgency coming out of the Republican-dominated legislature.
The urgency to them is, let's preempt local governments from being able to tell any developer anything about any type of development. And that, for example, is Senate Bill 180, where they preempted local governments from being able to dictate how a developer builds if it's burdensome or restrictive in any way after X amount of years after a hurricane. Well, if you just have those broad terms and those broad dynamics post-hurricane, then you're basically stopping a local government from being able to say what should and should not be built in their own communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure if you go pull some reports, there's probably a check that was written to help push that kind of policy forward.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to them, they get to market it as, we're stopping these selfish, money-hungry local nonprofits, from wasting the time of these developers that just want to build homes and create relief for people. They're using the pain and suffering of the everyday resident to try and gaslight us into thinking that Senate Bill 180 is helpful, when really how many governments, I think it was 10 or 15 governments came together to sue, Democrat and Republican governments came together to sue the state legislature because they want to be able to say, hey, we don't have enough drinking water here. We need to stop this growth or prohibit our conservation lands from getting developed. And the state wants the developer to be off the hook of having to worry about that.
Yeah, we have a problem here where I think the Republicans love to say they're the party of small government. But anytime an actual small government does something that they don't like, here comes the state legislature. And you said it right. They basically try to gaslight folks into following them to vote against their own best interests. And that's why I think it's so important that folks use their platform that are knowledgeable about the issues that can kind of break it down for everyday folks to do that and to explain it to people, because I think, unfortunately, a lot of folks just don't know. And so they just see what they're given, the kind of propaganda. And a lot of folks don't verify it or double check it, and they just kind of go with it. And we really just have to start educating folks to realize, vote for your best interests. Stop, focusing on just the party told you this is good. So actually look at it. Is this what's good for you? And a lot of things that we see come out of the legislature, no, it is not. It makes our lives harder. It's solving problems that don't even exist. Right.
So, we are in a housing crisis. The whole country is in a housing crisis. Yeah. What I believe people don't want to say out loud is part of why we're in a housing crisis is not just private equity firms that are gobbling up homes and, selling them or controlling them and becoming terrible price gouging landlords. But we also have a housing crisis because climate change is wreaking havoc across our country, and we're not tallying up and comparing the amount of damage, the cost of that damage, and what it's doing to take away inventory and displacing our own U.S. citizen residents here. And so with that being said, we have a housing crisis, but I feel like lawmakers tend to pin that against environmentalists who say we need to slow the growth and preserve parts of Florida because it is, a giant aquifer with limestone and, extremely important waterways that are interconnected. And as soon as you start depleting the aquifer, you could create ecological harm that can completely devastate some critical ecosystems. But then they point to the need for affordable housing to mass grade thousands of acres and put up these mega mansions in the middle of nowhere that you have to take a toll road to get anywhere. In that fight, I found that the mega developers' funding and influence in getting their hand chosen, usually some other executive from some development or law firm, to run for office is the answer for them to obfuscate around the accountability. You not taking that PAC money and steering clear of those types of contributions really, I believe, sets you apart. But how do you think you can go to Tallahassee and fight that army of lobbyists that almost tried to pass 32, preemption bills to stop our local governments from slowing the growth in Tallahassee last session?
Yeah, well, for one, I'm just going to speak my mind and use my voice to hold them accountable. I don't have to worry about them, threatening to not write me a check when I rerun. And I think that's one of the luxuries of not taking that kind of money, because I know what the folks here in District 21 want me to fight for, and I can do that unapologetically. I think when it comes to, housing, I think one of the bigger issues is that when folks in the legislature want to talk about building more houses, they're always thinking about building outward.
Right.
And I think we need to really start looking at building vertically. We need denser, more diverse housing, and connect that with public transportation, public transit. We can't continue to build out and then folks have to depend on a car no matter what, which, increases pollution and, has environmental harm. So we really need to focus on how can we invest in dense, diverse housing connected to public transit, and not always focus on, those mega mansions that are houses way out in a lot of the environmental areas that we need to be protecting and preserving.
Mm-hmm. I mean, conservation should be just as much of a priority as the smart growth, and they should work in unison, in my opinion. Infill and being able to change our zoning laws so that they can be more inclusionary is an extremely important step. But transportation, I mean, we have had so many opportunities to expand our transportation. For some reason, the state legislature just doesn't want to. And my speculation is because Disney, wants to keep tourists from traveling throughout the state and being able to have options. But maybe you have more insight as to ways that we can tackle the transportation crisis as well.
Well, yeah, I think we just need to start investing in it. And it's kind of crazy to me that, there's no urgency there either from the legislature, because I feel like that's such a bipartisan issue. Everyone wants, the high speed rails and stuff that we see, like in movies and TVs and across the country. Folks want that. So many folks. I think I just had someone messaging me yesterday. I have a priority survey, and they said that they wanted like an Amtrak route from the district over towards Orlando, because in District 21, the closest major airport is MCO, and so everyone pretty much has to drive there. And it would make sense to have some sort of Amtrak route, train route, something that goes through and connects all throughout the state. The surrounding states have entered into a compact to start building railroads across the country, but Florida has not entered into that pact. And I want to say Rep. Henson's current rep here in District 21, she sponsored legislation the last couple of years to try to do that, but there just hasn't been movement.
Is she termed out?
So I think no, because of redistricting. I think she could have served one more term, but she decided to just retire this year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at your district and it looks a little gerrymandered. It looks like they purposely found the 2 blue spots of, within Ocala and within Gainesville and just cut a district out. And we're having this conversation like the week of a special session being called to gerrymander our congressional maps. I mean, how do you feel about the ways that Florida has tried to jump through hoops to retain power for the Republicans?
Oh, God. Well, so for one, I think Americans in general hate gerrymandering, partisan gerrymandering, no matter who does it. It's also kind of insane to do when you have been in power for 30 years and you currently have a supermajority here. We've had several lawsuits over the last batch of congressional maps that they passed. And it's crazy that they're now coming back and saying, no, we didn't gerrymander it enough and they want to do it again.
Against the Constitution.
Yeah. And I think it shows that they're afraid. They know that people are upset and they're frustrated with the way things have been going. And I think recent special elections here in Florida and other elections across the country have started to show that the people are revolting against those that are currently in power, creating all these crises. And so I think now their goal is to just try to rig the system so that they stay in power without earning the support of more voters. But I would like to think that if they still go through with this, that it's only going to piss off people more. And they're going to end up, drawing some relatively safe Republican districts are going to be, closer to being flippable. And those people are going to be more vulnerable. And so I'm really hoping that this backfires on them because they seem hell bent on just going through with it anyways. But we do need to get to a point, not just here in the state, but across the country where we ban partisan gerrymandering. Voters should be choosing their politicians, their elected leaders, not the other way around.
I mean, Florida has really clear laws already, but, they're still going to break their own laws in order to, harness as much power as possible because, like you said, they're scared. And we just came off of the Virginia maps passing from their referendum to do partisan gerrymandering and to favor Democrats because of the threats of Trump and because of the threats of, having Texas's map and then, of course, California. But we have to get to a point where you said exactly the thing I was going to say, which is people should be able to choose their representatives and the representatives shouldn't be carving out districts that they know they can win just to have that level of control. And we already are pretty gerrymandered. So it's really sad that we have to be the foreground of this fight here in Florida. But it really inspires me that people like you are willing to just take the mantle and, run at the problem instead of running away from it.
Yeah, we have to, because they are just getting so bold and brazen with the things that they are doing. And so I think the response back to that needs to be bold as well. And because I think it's so crazy that even when they redrew the last gerrymandered maps, they got the maps passed down from the governor. Like, we never did that before, Right. Usually the lawmakers, everyone else, they put together the maps. And this time they were just kind of waiting to get passed down the maps that they were going to be told to move forward with. It's like people have just lost their ability to be free thinkers.
Are there any, priorities that I know there's so much going on? I mean, we could talk about immigration. We can talk about education. Are there any pieces of legislation that you want to highlight or any primary issues that you think maybe aren't as on the radar of individuals that you want to prioritize? So yeah, I'll mention one that got brought up to me in a conversation with someone back in the district. But it was about trying to sponsor legislation that would make the phone calls in jails and prisons free. Because the state makes millions of dollars a year off of making people pay to talk to their loved ones at home. In Florida, I think it's number 3 in terms of our incarceration rate.
per like 100,000 residents. And so, the data shows that when people have the ability to, have social connections with people that they know and love, they have better like behavioral outcomes, and when they're incarcerated. And so I don't think we should be making money off of that. I'm also not a person that believes in cash bail either. We have an issue where we criminalize poverty, and to then, basically lock someone up for things that probably could have been avoidable if they had access to, basic necessities and resources, to then make them pay to even just be able to have social contact with the outside world. When that person is back out into the real world, how do you expect them to just immediately, just become readjusted to everything when you've kind of cut them off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the South, the prison system has been egregiously inhumane. Mm-hmm. And now to think that our own elected officials are working with the private prisons in order to find ways to make money.
It's disgusting.
Or to use labor to make, excessive profits for different companies that exploit, prison labor. It's really, really disgusting. And I think Florida, it might not be the worst in the South. I think Louisiana and I think Georgia have worse conditions. I think Texas is the worst in the country, if I'm not mistaken. But we could do so much better, and we could be a place where true rehabilitation could be the priority instead of just cruel punishment for the sake of exploitation.
Absolutely. I hope to make a big impact in that area. Mm-hmm. Even like the fines and fees, the fact that voters made it clear that yes, someone who serves their time they shouldn't have their right to vote taken away from them. And then for the government to come in and, make them again, add a price tag to it.
Right.
It's insane to me.
Right. Well, I always ask every guest this when we're kind of coming to a landing, but you're running a campaign. That's like a full-time job. And you're go, trying to talk to voters. What do you do to like replenish yourself?
I like to, so for one, I have a dog. So I get out multiple times a day, just go on walks.
What kind of dog?
He is a pit.
Oh, what?
Got a nice little pit bull.
Yeah.
And so I'll take him out, and sometimes I'll leave my phone in the house and I'll just walk him in my neighborhood. And so I just completely unplug. I listen to a lot of music. That's usually where I find my safe place.
What artists?
Oh, so many. The Weeknd's one of my favorite artists. I'm also a big Michael Jackson fan, and I say that because I need to go see
the new movie.
Yes.
I've heard so many things. I see it on everybody's timeline this week.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about that. But I also love Doja Cat. I pretty much listen to every genre. I have tickets to Ariana Grande's concert coming up soon. Really excited about that one. How did you get
your hands on those?
I think I just got lucky with the battle and the Ticketmaster queue, where I got in and out of there in like 5 minutes.
Wow.
So yeah. So really looking forward to that. I love going to festivals, music, like concerts and stuff like that. Bit hard while you're on the campaign trail, but I still try to find time when I can.
Well, that's awesome. Any closing like priorities or things that you want to make sure voters in your district know?
I think the big thing for me is that we can't continue to do the same things and elect the same kind of people and expect different results. I think this moment that we're in deserves to be met with urgency. We don't get out of this by trimming our message or being afraid to stand up for what we truly believe in. Now is the time to be bold and to shoot for the moon. I still believe that a progressive Florida is possible, and I'm willing to fight for it. And I know there's millions of people across the state that are willing to fight for it. Mm-hmm. And so that's all we need to do. We need to elect leaders that are going to fight, and we all need to stand up, use our voices, come together, organize our communities. And we have to just meet this moment head on.
So if people wanted to volunteer or donate and get involved, what would they have to do?
So I want to say I'm running my own campaign, but if I wasn't, my campaign manager would be so happy that you prompted me to mention my website.
It's just my trade.
So yeah, if folks want to get involved, donate, volunteer, you can go to fieldsforflorida.com, fully spelled out. And that has all the different ways you can get involved and to follow along on social media.
He's really fighting because he wants a train to go from Gainesville to Tallahassee so that he doesn't have to drive 3 hours, 2.5 hours every single day when you do get elected.
That would be great.
That would be fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here and for inspiring not only hopefully young people of color to run for office, but also inspiring me. I frankly get a little burnt out with reading about state politics because every day you open the paper and you're like, wow, more of my rights are gone.
Yeah.
But knowing that people like you are running makes this year even more exciting to pay attention to. And so I will definitely be promoting your website and your campaign to all of our friends of the Organizing to Victory podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. Times are dark right now, so I always try to be positive and keep a smile on my face. And I feel like when I talk to people, they're happy to see that, that people are happy and are energetic and are ready. So
awesome. Well, best of luck in your campaign and thank you for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you heard today, please comment, subscribe, and share. And visit organizingtovictory.com so that you can learn more about all the ways that we're going to be organizing this year. It is the most important election year of our lives. I know you hear that all the time, but we here at Organizing to Victory hope to not just talk about the issues, but to organize around the issues. So please share, subscribe, and follow us. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.